Hello, everyone. My name is Vladimir Kozlov, and I am CEO and founder of LightCounting Market Research. And in the next 10-15 minutes, I'll share some of our latest research on the market for optical components used in networks, data centers, and the impact on this market made by COVID-19. Compared to other industry, optical networking and data centers is doing very well in 2020. And all the shutdowns caused by the pandemic resulted in a boost to the internet traffic. Many service providers and cloud companies reported that traffic in their networks increased by 20-30% just in the months of May and April as the shutdowns started in North America and Europe. And that's certainly very important for our forecasts as it boosted demand for optical networks, for optics used in networks as well as in data centers. So this chart shows how we use data on the internet traffic growth for forecasting future demand for DWDM optics. And the chart compares growth rates in internet traffic shown as a red line, and you can see a boost from 30% to 50% growth rate in 2020. So that's the impact of COVID-19 on the annual traffic growth. Kind of disrupts a steady gradual decline in the growth rate. And please keep in mind that the internet traffic continues to grow very fast. 40% per year is doubling every 2 years. So decline from 40 to 30 is, it's a very modest decline. So the traffic continues to grow very fast. It's just the growth rate, relative growth rate, that's declining. And we use this data to look at the correlation or lack of correlation with investments into DWDM networks, and we measure it by calculating number of ports shipped every year and accounting for the bandwidth of each port. We can calculate how fast the bandwidth of DWDM networks is expanding. And of course, it fluctuates. So periods of economic decline, like we've seen in 2009, 2010, usually result in slow investments. And economic pickups, like in 2008, we've seen rate of bandwidth growth exceeds the rate of internet traffic growth. So, in 2020, obviously the market or the economy is in recession, and in a typical recession, we would see significant drop in investments in DWDM bandwidth. This recession is unique because the demand for bandwidth is very strong. So even though there is a slight decline in investments, particularly by service providers, it's barely noticeable on that scale. So you can see the green line kind of dropping just a little bit. By the way, the blue line is the assumption for the forecast we used 6 months ago. The green one is the latest adjustment that we made, accounting for higher than expected declines in service provider revenue, which in turn impact how much money they can invest into the network. And we adjusted our future forecast down a bit more, and I'll talk about it in the next few slides. So if you look at kind of our industry from the high levels, there are two different sets of end users financing the industry. So it's the communication service providers, companies like AT&T, British Telecom, Orange, and cloud companies, we call them ICPs, so Amazon, Alibaba, and others. So if you look at how much money those customers are putting into our industry, both of them are investing quite heavily, both types of those companies. And this data actually looks at just top 15 companies in each category. So the cloud companies were increasing their investments quite rapidly, and this year is actually going to be even higher, what we projected. With service providers, they actually declining a bit deeper than we expected. So those two curves are converging actually faster than we expected in the past. So the bottom line is that cloud companies will have even more impact on the market this year as service providers are forced to reduce their spending. If you look at the latest financial results of the cloud companies, they're extremely impressive. This is the third quarter, calendar quarter of 2020. Looking at the top 5 companies reporting very strong growth in revenues as well as spending, and several new records, all-time highs reported there. It's not all rosy for the cloud companies. They also have challenges, kind of paying a price for their success. You're probably aware that many regulators in US and Europe are starting to kind of limit the dominance of companies like Google and Amazon. You may not have heard that China is actually doing something very similar. So Chinese government just recently published a new set of regulations designed to limit the dominance of very large cloud companies, including Alibaba, and ensure a more even landscape for their competitors. So it's certainly not all rosy for them, but I think the growth we're seeing is truly phenomenal. And even the government regulations are not going to stop it. They may slow down this growth, but it's very hard to imagine a scenario where companies like Alibaba would stop investing into future technologies. If you look at telecom service providers, the situation is different. So both revenue and capex projected to decline probably in single digits in 2020. If you look at the reports of Ciena, Cisco, Intel, they all reporting a sharply lower outlook. And it started in the second quarter of the year. It's kind of continuing in the third quarter. Even so, it's not a huge drop, but it's single percent changes for service providers, kind of double percent, 15% changes for enterprise type of customers. So, economic recessions are ultimately taking their toll on the industry. And our forecast assumes that a solid economic recovery in 2021 will bring service providers back to starting more new projects and kind of boosting demand for next generation optics. If you look at changes in the forecast for Ethernet transceivers, 2020 is actually exceeding our expectations. So many companies were able to resume productions faster than we expected. And demand for Ethernet optics was very strong, particularly in the second quarter of 2020. We've seen higher than expected sales for all products. All Ethernet products have seen spikes in demand, starting with 1 gigabit Ethernet and all the way to 400 gigabit Ethernet. But looking at the future, certainly lower spending on telecom service provider and enterprise is going to take its toll in 2021. And particularly as far as adoption of new technologies is concerned. We also seeing concerns among cloud companies, particularly Chinese cloud companies, are more worried about security of their supply chain. And not just for optics, but also semiconductor chips. So they may be more careful in jumping on the next generation technologies, depending on how the trade war between China and US unfolds in the next few months. And in general, we see a trend towards building higher trade barriers continuing around the world. And unfortunately, that will slow down the global economic growth. So accounting for all those changes, we did reduce the forecast for Ethernet, quite substantially, but it's still, doubling in market, almost doubling in size in the next 5 years. This chart just illustrates how much more dominant the cloud companies became over the last just 4 years. 2016, cloud companies accounted for less than half of consumption of Ethernet optics. This year, we expect them to take 70%, actually probably more than 70% of Ethernet optics this year. So they continue to invest very heavily in their data centers. And if you look at the market projections for sales of Ethernet transceivers sorted by data rate, it's the next generation optics that's driving the growth. And we're seeing Amazon, Google deploying 400 gig connectivity this year and increasing that over time. Facebook is planning to start deploying 200 gig next year. And we have 800 gig on the roadmap. So Google is going to be the first one to do it in 2022, 2023. Some companies are showing samples already. And we expect Amazon is going to need it in the end of the forecast as well. So I think I'm going to stop here and look forward to your questions. We do publish 2-3 reports per month, so this chart just gives you an idea of what we cover. We also added coverage of the wireless infrastructure. So light counting is actually more than just counting light. We're also counting RF now and everything that's associated with that. So we certainly very, very productive. And I would like to thank the team of analysts that contributes to light counting research. Thank you very much.